Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time when life was cold, loud, smelly, and unforgiving, but also kind of fascinating in its absolute chaos. Yep, we're talking about medieval times, not the restaurant. The real deal. You're not royalty, you're not a knight, you're just you, living in a thatched hut with your entire family and some chickens. Imagine it. You open your eyes before dawn. It's freezing. You're wrapped in a rough wool blanket that's maybe never been washed. Beneath you, a sack of straw, flattened and itchy, rests on a dirt floor. The low ceiling makes you duck. Your first breath of the day smells like old smoke, livestock, and something sour that you've just accepted as air. You try to stretch, but your muscles already ache, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this type of content. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your first thought today isn't, what's for breakfast? It's probably, how cold is it outside? And will I lose another toe? Your second thought, please don't let the cow have kicked over the lantern again. Because fires are constant threats in these tightly packed wooden thatch homes. The air is heavy with moisture, and dew clings to the inside of your one grimy window, which is basically a stretched piece of oiled animal hide. Glass exists, sure, but only the super rich have enough to actually see through it. You squint anyway. You're not alone in your home. Your parents, siblings, maybe your grandparents, all packed together on the dirt floor. And yes, the chickens are inside, too. So is the goat. Why? Because it's safer than leaving them outside, where foxes, wolves, or even desperate neighbors might help themselves. You pull on the same rough tunic you wore yesterday, and the day before that. It's made of undyed wool, and yes, it smells like wet sheep. You try not to think about the fact that you've never actually had a bath, just occasional splashes of cold water in a nearby stream. That clean feeling, it's more of a concept than a sensation. The fire has gone out overnight, and reigniting it takes effort. Flint, steel, dry, moss, if you're lucky. Otherwise, you might trudge to the neighbors and beg for a coal in a piece of bark or clay, praying the wind doesn't kill it on your way home. Once there's a flicker of warmth again, you breathe a little easier. Fires are everything. They give you heat, light, and a way to cook. They also smoke up the room and sting your eyes, because chimneys, yeah, those are for the rich. You've got a hole in the roof. Historians still argue whether every peasant home truly kept livestock indoors, or, if that's a bit of exaggeration, from disgusted travelers. But we know this. Animals were wealth, and people did whatever they could to protect them. Sharing space with a pig wasn't odd, it was just smart. As you go outside, your bare feet hit frozen mud, or worse, something squishy. Shoes are rare, and when you have them, they're made of thin leather that soaks through in minutes. Honestly, you're better off barefoot. The village is just waking up. You hear the creak of carts, the bleating of sheep, and someone already yelling at their ox. The smell, oh, it's potent. A mix of manure, sweat, and fish gone slightly off. Your nose adjusts. Eventually, you pass by other homes like yours, some slightly better, most just as poor. The wealth gap is enormous. A few large stone houses belong to the Lord's stewards, or maybe the miller. Everyone else, packed like rats in mouldy straw homes. Mold, by the way, is just accepted. No one's calling the HOA. You spot the manor house in the distance. It's not a castle, but it has walls and a roof that doesn't leak, which basically makes it a palace. You've never been inside. One quirky fact: in some areas, villagers believed it was bad luck to build a perfectly square house. So many homes were oddly shaped, almost like squished gingerbread cottages, warped by time, weather, and superstition. And while you're outside, nature isn't your peaceful friend. You're constantly watching for wolves, which still roam parts of Europe during this era. And don't even get started on bears. Some regions, especially in the north, still have them wandering around like it's no big deal. You clutch your stick and pretend it'll help. Now, you've been awake for an hour. You're already exhausted. Your back hurts. Your nose won't stop running. You're itchy in places we can't mention. And the day hasn't even started. You wonder if you'll get lucky today. Maybe no one dies. That'd be a win, because disease is everywhere. You've seen people cough themselves to death in days. Sometimes entire families vanish in a week. You don't know why. You just know it happens. And yet, this is life. People sing, children play, and somehow you keep going. It's just the beginning of another cold, muddy, miserable medieval day. You shuffle over to the wooden table, which is more of a slab on legs, and eye your breakfast with the enthusiasm of a soggy sponge. It's a crust of dark rye bread, so hard it could be used as a weapon, and a tin cup of ale that's weaker than your will to keep chewing. There's no butter, no jam, and no coffee, because, sorry, that won't arrive in Europe for a few hundred more years. Hope you weren't counting on a latte. Breakfast is functional, not fun. You eat to survive, not to enjoy yourself. The bread tastes faintly of mildew, and that might not even be accidental. A lot of flour is cut with whatever's available, sometimes ground up beans, sometimes weeds. If there's meat, it's probably from the night before, and probably still has a feather or two attached. You chew anyway. Most villagers drink ale for breakfast. Yes, even the kids. Not because it's party time, but because the water isn't safe. Streams are often shared with animals, and wells aren't always clean. Boiling helps, but that takes fuel and time. So, you sip the light ale, which has just enough alcohol to kill some germs without knocking you out. Your stomach rumbles, not in hunger, but in protest. Welcome to the medieval gut. It's a battleground. Your diet is mostly bread, cabbage, peas, onions, and the occasional turnip. Meat is rare, unless you're part of a noble household, or something died mysteriously nearby and you decide to risk it. Historians still argue whether most peasants were truly malnourished or just chronically underfed. Some archaeological digs show surprisingly healthy bones. Others reveal stunted growth and anemia. It might have depended heavily on where and when you lived. You wipe your hands on your tunic, which only makes them dirtier. The fire crackles weakly behind you. It smells like wet moss and regret. One of your siblings starts coughing again. You all exchange a glance, but say nothing. Coughs are like background music in your life now. Now let's talk about kitchenware. You don't have ceramic dishes unless you're lucky or stealing. Most food is served in a shared wooden bowl or directly off the table. Spoons are common. Forks, not yet mainstream. They're seen as a bit pretentious and, frankly, devilish. Fingers do the trick. If your family is slightly better off, you might have a tiny block of salt. It's a status symbol. If not, well, flavor is optional. Spices, exotic. expensive, and stored under lock and key by the rich. You wouldn't even recognize cinnamon if it hit you in the nose. And let's be real, you probably have. This era doesn't exactly have sneeze guards. Oh, and milk. Don't expect it cold or fresh. If your cow or goat gave enough, great. But it sours quickly and turns into something between yogurt and questionable science experiment. Still, it's food, so you eat it, or drink it, or chew it. Depends on the day. You hear the church bell clang in the distance. It's not exactly a clock, but it's how you know what time it might be. Timekeeping isn't exact. You live by daylight and the ringing of bells. Noon is just when the sun is highest. Evening is when it's too dark to see. Quirky fact. Some households used something called a tide dial or a mass dial. Little carved stone circles on church walls to track times for prayers and mass. Basically, a sun-powered schedule, medieval style. You glance outside again. The sky is finally brightening, pale grey, with a hint of maybe blue. The village is waking up. You hear someone yelling about a missing pig. Again, it's always the pig. It's time to leave the house. You sigh and grab your sack. Inside, a crudely made knife, maybe a wooden spoon, and a few withered vegetables you're hoping to trade or contribute to the communal pot later. Your feet still hurt from yesterday. Blisters are normal. So is the smell. There's no deodorant, and while herbs, like sage or lavender, are used for smelling nice, they're rare and not exactly spritzed liberally. You are the funk. The wind cuts through your tunic as you step outside. Another long, grey day of work ahead. But first, the walk to the fields, which isn't short or easy. The paths are muddy, lined with thorns, and full of other exhausted villagers just trying to get by. You hear someone humming a chant as they pass you. Probably a bit of old pagan tradition mixed with Christian superstition. That's normal. People blend beliefs all the time. You mutter one too, just in case, and then there's the mud. It's not just a little muddy, it's legendary. Medieval mud could eat a shoe hole, and probably did yesterday. Roads are rare, and even then, there are often just ruts worn into the earth. If it's raining, you're basically walking through pudding. You catch sight of the Lord's tax collector riding past on a horse, not even trying to avoid splashing you. The fine silk lining of his cloak mocks your patched wool as it flaps in the breeze. He doesn't even look at you. The smell of his horse's sweat is oddly comforting. At least it's warm. You're still chewing that morning bread. That's not a joke. It's just that dense. Your jaw hurts. You'd kill for a croissant, but those don't exist here. Not for you, anyway. Before the day officially starts, you'll need to join your neighbors in a short communal prayer. You gather in the field's edge, heads bowed, asking for good weather, protection from illness, and that the new Lord Steward won't be as much of a jerk as the last one. Spoiler, he is. That's the first rays of sunlight cut through the trees. Your stomach grumbles again. You're not full. You're never really full. Just not dying of hunger yet. But that's the medieval way, and as you take your place in the labor line, shoulder to shoulder with others just like you, half asleep, half starving, fully annoyed, you realize the truth. This is normal. This is life. And the worst part, it's only breakfast. You trudge through the fields now, the mud sucking at your feet with every reluctant step. The wind hasn't let up, and there's no sun to warm your back. Just that damp, unshakable chill that feels like it's settled into your bones. Your fingers are stiff. Your breath is visible. And your first task of the day? Weeding, or maybe hauling, or mucking. Doesn't matter. It's all exhausting, and it's all required. You're not a farmer by choice. You're a serf. You don't own land. You are the land. You work a small plot that technically belongs to the local lord, and in return, you're allowed to live on it. Think of it as rent paid in sweat, not silver. This isn't a quick job. You'll be out here until sunset unless something breaks. Your tools, your back, or your spirit. Sometimes all three. The soil is heavy with clay, and you work it using a crude wooden plow that squeaks like it's begging to be put out of its misery. Oxen might help, if your village has any. If not, congratulations, you are the oxen. You hunch low, yanking stubborn weeds from the earth. Your hands are cracked and raw. Gloves, nope. You might wrap cloth around your fingers if you have scraps. Otherwise, you just ... deal. Dirt under the nails isn't a hygiene concern, it's a permanent feature. And while you're down there, tugging at roots and hoping the Lord doesn't raise taxes again, you notice your neighbor's field is looking ... suspiciously better, greener, fuller. There's no actual competition, but still, you feel the tension. Maybe they've got better compost. Maybe they've bribed someone. Maybe they made a deal with a local spirit. Historians still argue whether belief in field spirits and land fairies influenced farming practices or was just folksy decoration. Either way, you're half considering leaving a bit of bread out tonight, just in case. The Lord's Reeve, the medieval version of a middle manager, rides by on a scrawny horse. He's here to check that everyone's pulling their weight. He doesn't smile. He doesn't stop. He just stares. You keep your head down. One bad look and you could be accused of slacking, or worse, of plotting something. And if you think HR complaints exist here, well, the stocks are open all week. Lunch. It's not really a break. It's more like you squat in the field, open your cloth pouch, and gnaw at a cold onion and a hunk of yesterday's bread. Maybe a piece of cheese if it hasn't gone moldy. It probably has. But you scrape off the green stuff and pretend it's seasoning. You wash it down with more ale or water so cloudy it looks like it's already been chewed. As you chew, slowly, methodically, you look around. Everyone else is doing the same. Men, women, teenagers, the elderly, even kids, from about the age of 5, are helping out. Childhood isn't a protected time, it's a training phase for more work. There's a distant clang of metal, someone's blacksmithing. You can smell the faint trace of smoke and hot iron. You envy that fire, even if the job's brutal. At least the forge is warm. You wonder if you could apprentice, but those spots are rare, often passed down in families. Most people never leave the fields. One quirky tidbit. Some medieval workers believed that whistling while working would summon evil spirits, so fields stayed eerily quiet, just the occasional grunt, cough, or whispered complaint about the Reeves horse smelling worse than the compost heap. You turn back to your task. Dig, pull, drag, repeat. Time crawls forward, each hour measured, not by clocks, but by the position of the sun and the ache in your spine. If you stop too long, the cold settles in. If you keep going, your legs burn. Pick your poison. Your clothes, already damp with morning dew, are now soaked with sweat. Wool does not breathe. It clings, it chafes. And every now and then, a flea takes a bite out of you for good measure. You slap at your neck, miss, and go back to digging. Occasionally, you dream of escape. Maybe joining a monastery, if you can read, or enlisting in an army. where at least there's food, or becoming a peddler and walking from village to village, selling trinkets. But those are daydreams. Right now, your job is to keep pulling carrots. Historians still debate how much freedom medieval peasants actually had. Some argue many could move, marry, and trade freely. Others say they were tightly controlled by lords and tied to the land for life. Truth probably lives somewhere in between, like the carrot you just stepped on. You look up, the clouds are gathering, great rain. Again, there's no schedule to postpone to, no dry area to move to. You just ... keep going. Tools get slippery, clothes heavier, the earth more stubborn. Your job doesn't stop because the weather's having a tantrum. And let's not forget, if your harvest fails, you still owe the same amount of grain to your lord. You could starve, and he'd still have his feast. That's the beauty of feudalism. All of the work, none of the reward. You blink back sweat, or is that rain? Hard to tell. The day drags on. Your fingers are pruny from the damp. Your knees have locked twice. You fantasize about a hot bath, maybe even soap. Then you remember, that's just for the nobility. You're lucky if you get a cold stream once a month. By late afternoon, your back has completely betrayed you. Every muscle is screaming. Your hands are numb, and still you keep working. Why? Because if you don't, someone else has to cover for you. And if they don't, the harvest fails. And if the harvest fails, everyone suffers. And just when you think you might collapse, the bell rings again, one long clang. Not freedom, but the next miserable task. You stand up, wobble a bit, and start walking back toward the village. There's still water to fetch, animals to tend, and maybe, if you're lucky, a bit of soup before night falls. You catch your reflection in a puddle. Mud on your cheeks, straw in your hair, eyes half closed. You smile anyway. Why? Because, somehow, you're still here. And this was just one day in the fields. You get to do it all again tomorrow. You arrive back at your hut. If hut isn't too generous, and all you want is to lie down and not move for 6 hours, but you can't, because now it's time to freshen up. And by that, we mean, try not to smell quite as much as you did when you woke up. You splash a bit of cold water from the bucket into your face. It doesn't help. Your hands are filthy. Your feet are worse. You scrape the mud off with a stick and shrug. That's close enough to clean. There's no soap, not for you. Lye-based soaps exist, but they're mostly reserved for wealthier folks, or monasteries that make their own. You might rub some ashes or sand on your skin to scrub off the dirt, but the results are ... questionable. And then there's the real enemy, fleas. Lice, too, but fleas are relentless. They live in your clothes, your bedding, your hair. You scratch behind your ear and flick away a tiny black dot. Again, let's talk about hygiene, or the absence of it. Baths happen, but not often, and not in tubs filled with rose-scented water. You stand in a barrel or squat in a stream. Winter, you skip it, because hypothermia is not a vibe. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly avoided bathing or just had fewer chances to do it. Some towns had public bathhouses, but those became controversial. Too much mingling, the church said. So eventually, they started shutting down. You reach for a cloth to wipe off the sweat and dirt. It was white once. Now it's more of a permanent beige with patches that are ... crusty. Best not to think about it. And where, you ask, is the bathroom? Ah, yes, the chamber pot. If you're lucky, it's ceramic. If not, it's a wooden bowl. Either way, it lives under the bed or in a corner. You relieve yourself into it. Maybe add a handful of straw, and then someone guess who has to empty it. Where? Into the gutter, or the nearest ditch. Or just toss it into the alley and yell, "Gardiloo," if you live in a town. But you don't, so you just chuck it and hope no one's walking past. The smell never truly leaves. It clings to everything. Your clothes, your bedding, your soul. You light a bit of dried sage or rosemary if you have it, not to banish spirits, but to banish stink. And while we're on smells, let's talk mouths. You haven't brushed your teeth, ever. Toothbrushes aren't really a thing. Some people use cloths or chew sticks with frayed ends. Maybe you rub your gums with salt or charcoal, and you definitely avoid smiling too wide, because, honestly, your teeth are more grey than white, and maybe a few shorts. You run your tongue along your molars and wince. One's loose, another throbs great, another medieval day, another pre-dentistry nightmare. Still, you've got work to do. You pick up the rushlight, a twisted rope dipped in animal fat, and light. It gives off more smoke than glow, but it's something. Candles, costly, reserved for the church, the nobility, or extremely smug merchants. Your home has no chimney, so the smoke from your cooking fire mixes with the rushlight fumes and clings to the ceiling, turning it black. You cough. Everyone coughs. The baby wheezes. And the priest says it's probably a punishment for someone's sins. You suspect it's more about poor ventilation. In the corner, a pile of clothes sits waiting. You grab a tunic to shake out the lice and notice it has a new hole. Of course, mice, maybe. Moths, possibly, or just fabric giving up on life. Your clothing is ... practical. One tunic, maybe two. A belt made from rope. No socks, leather shoes. If you're lucky, and if you're really lucky, they almost fit. Most clothes are made from wool, coarse, scratchy, heavy when wet, which is always. Linen underclothes exist, but they're rare for peasants. You itch constantly. You consider that normal, fun, medieval fact. Some people wore tiny pouches of herbs like lavender, mint, or sage around their necks or tucked into their clothes to keep bugs away. You try it. The fleas laugh. You hear a ruckus outside. Someone's yelling about a broken fence. Again, you step out to investigate, and the smell hits you. It's pig dung, or maybe human, or both. It all blends together in a way that makes your nose twitch and your brain just shut off. The streets are more like trenches. There's no drainage system here. Water, waste, and sludge all pool together in a friendly puddle that takes up half the path. You walk wide. The village dogs are out again, skinny, half-wild, growling, over scraps. You give them space. They're not pets. They're survivors, like you, and they're probably full of worms. You walk by the community well. A couple of people are there, arguing over whose turn it is. You wait your turn, lower the bucket, and bring up what might generously be called water. It has things floating in it. You take a sip anyway. You don't have a choice. Back home, you pour the rest into the cooking pot. Tonight's dinner is onion and barley soup. No meat. Again, you peel the onion slowly, savoring the sting in your eyes. At least it smells like something. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants had enough to eat on average. Some years were good, others were devastating. Famine was always one bad harvest away. You've seen people eat acorns, boiled leather, bark. You pray this year holds out. As the pot simmers, the smoke thickens. Your eyes burn, your hands are raw from the cold. Your stomach growls like a church bell. You stir slowly, the barley clumping at the bottom. It smells earthy, a little burnt. Very real. You hand out bowls. Everyone eats in silence. No one's satisfied. Just ... not starving. You lie down on the straw pile again, the same spot you woke up from. The fire flickers low. Someone coughs. Someone snores. You pull the blanket up to your chin and try not to think about how many bugs just climbed in with you. The wind howls outside, rain taps on the thatch. Somewhere in the dark, a dog barks and then whimpers. You close your eyes, scratching your scalp with one cracked nail, and wonder how tomorrow will smell. You wake up, scratching. Again, it's your scalp this time, and something under your arm, and something ... lower. You sigh. Lice are as much a part of medieval life as bread and blisters. You sit up, try not to think about it, and immediately scratch again. Your blanket, wool, coarse, and never washed, probably has an ecosystem of its own by now. You'd burn it, but then you'd freeze. So, you endure. Your tunic is still damp from yesterday. You shake it out, and a couple of bugs, definitely not dead, fall out. You smack one with your hand and miss. It escapes into the straw floor like a tiny, smug monster. Clothes in medieval times aren't fashion, they're function, and barely. You've got maybe one outfit, two if you're a show-off. Your outer tunic is rough wool, undyed, scratchy as sin underneath. If you're lucky, a linen shift. But linen wears out fast, and when it's gone, you just go without. You tie your belt, just a rope, really, and pray it holds. Underwear, that's not standard. You tug at your hose, which sag around the knees and are tied awkwardly to your tunic with laces. They never stay up. The medieval wardrobe is a puzzle you resolve every morning, and then you scratch again. You glance over at your younger brother, who's already dressed, already scratching. It's a family affair. You pluck a flea off your arm and flick it into the fire. It pops. You feel a little victorious. Let's talk lice. These tiny freeloaders don't just live in your hair, they also thrive in the seams of your clothes. There's even a special medieval tool for this. The knit comb, a fine, handmade wooden or bone comb used daily to pull out eggs. You find one and start dragging it through your scalp. It hurts. You grit your teeth. The tiny ping of lice hitting the floor is disturbingly satisfying. One quirky historical tidbit. Some medieval people believed lice were God's punishment for vanity, and thus a sign of humility. Others thought they were heat-loving beasts that only afflicted the living. So hey, if you have lice, at least you're alive. But here's the real kicker. If you've got no lice, people might think you're sick. Because when you're near death, the bugs leave. So in a grim twist, itching means you're doing okay. Medieval optimism at its finest. Once you've combed and scratched and sighed your way through getting dressed, it's time to go outside. The morning fog is thick again, heavy with the smell of manure and damp wood. You step into your cracked leather shoes and feel the familiar squish of yesterday's puddle. Lovely. Outside. Villagers are already going about their chores. You pass one of the older women pulling her chemise away from her armpits and swatting at fleas. She waves, casually flicking a louse off her shoulder, mid-greeting, totally normal. You do the same. You spot the town pig again. Not a pig. The pig He belongs to nobody and everybody. He wanders freely, occasionally chased by children, sometimes sleeping in the churchyard. He's covered in muck and mystery. Someone once tried to bathe him, he bid them. The day's task involves hauling firewood, which means walking out to the edge of the nearby forest and dragging back bundles of wet sticks. You try to ignore the itch crawling along your waistband as you walk. There's no point in pretending you're clean. As you move through the trees, you swat at mosquitoes, step in mud up to your ankle, and consider shaving your head. Monks do it. Maybe they're onto something. But then again, monks also voluntarily don't talk and spend half the day kneeling on cold stone, so maybe not. Historians still argue whether head shaving was common among non-clergy or just something done out of desperation. Either way, the image of a lice-free scalp haunts you like a dream. You find enough branches to load onto your back, bind them with twine, and start the slow trudge home. Your shoulders ache, your socks, if you have any, are soaked, and your right shoe is trying to escape. You pass the village pond, where someone is washing clothes. Washing is generous. They're slapping garments on a flat stone and dunking them in murky water. There's no soap, just elbow grease and prayers. The water smells faintly of fish and feet. You make a mental note not to drink from it. Again, your own clothes haven't been washed in weeks. Maybe longer. The general rule. If it doesn't stand up on its own, it's still wearable. You brush at a mysterious stain and hope it's just old turnip. Back in your hut. The fire has gone out. Again, you set down the wood, wipe your brow, and reach for the flint. It takes 10 tries, a burned thumb, and a few muttered curses. But, finally, the flame catches. You warm your hands and feel a bit of comfort, until you spot a rat in the corner. It scurries off, trailing something that looks like a stolen bit of cheesecloth. You sigh. At least it's not the weasel again. Oh yes, fun fact. Medieval homes were full of wildlife. Rats, mice, fleas, lice, spiders, flies, the occasional bird, if the roof thatch is loose, and, yes, sometimes snakes. You're not alone, ever. You scratch again. It's almost soothing now. A lullaby of discomfort. A neighbor drops by with a look that says, I'm here to talk, but also snoop. She sits, smooths her apron, also stained, and pulls out her own knit comb. You do the same. This is bonding, medieval style. She tells you that one of the miller's sons has a rash and might be cursed. You both nod solemnly and continue combing your heads like you're grooming baboons. Social life is surprisingly lively, if itchy. As the day wears on, your skin begins to feel raw. Not from disease, but from friction, wool rubbing against unwashed flesh, damp underlayers sticking to your legs, belts digging into your waist, and the lice never stop. Even at night, you hear them in your dreams, little imaginary voices whispering, scratch me. You're not going to bathe today, or tomorrow, or this week. Maybe next festival day. Maybe not. That you lie down again as the sky turns from grey to black. You scratch your scalp one last time, feel something move, and pretend it didn't. Single quotes to. You close your eyes and wonder, just briefly, what it must be like to feel truly clean. You wake to bells ringing in the distance, echoing through the misty morning like the universe itself, saying, time to suffer again. You groan softly, stretch your aching limbs, and immediately bump into your sibling, who's doing the same. Space is not a medieval luxury. Before your feet hit the floor, your mind is already preparing for something you can't escape. Church. Or, more accurately, the church. Capital C, always watching, always preaching, always very interested in what you're doing and why you're doing it wrong. The village priest walks by your hut at least twice a day. He doesn't smile. No one ever sees him eat. He smells faintly of incense and judgment. You're not sure if he sleeps. Probably not. He's too busy reminding everyone that hell is very real, very hot, and very ready for you. You pull on your least filthy tunic. It still smells like stew and sheep, and shuffle off toward the church with your neighbors. Attendance isn't optional. You need your soul saved, and you also need the priest not to accuse your family of heresy. Again, the church itself is the only stone building in town. Cold, damp, and echoey. It smells like mold and beeswax. Candles flicker near the altar. You take a seat on the hard bench and try to keep your eyes open as the priest drones in Latin, none of which you understand. No one does. That's the point. Latin is holy. Your confusion, also holy. You glance up at the stained glass window, if your church even has one, and think about how pretty it is. Then you remember that someone probably paid for it by donating their entire life savings in hopes of getting Aunt Mildred out of purgatory. Historians still argue whether the medieval populace truly believed every word the church said, or if they followed it more out of survival than faith. In truth, it was probably both. You don't not believe in demons when people are dying of mysterious fevers and lightning hits your roof twice in a week. You try to focus, but the incense makes your nose itch. You sneeze once. The priest glares. You cross yourself in apology. When the sermon ends, you shuffle outside again, and everyone stands around trying to look holier than each other. You overhear two women whispering about a man who sneezed during the blessing last week and hasn't been seen since. You remember sneezing just now. You quickly fake a cough to throw them off the scent. Let's talk about fear. Not just fear of disease or wolves or starvation, but the spiritual fear that threads through every medieval day like a tightrope. You've been taught since birth that God sees everything, that saints can intercede on your behalf, that angels fight invisible battles over your soul, and that the devil, he's real, he's clever, and he's probably already inside your neighbor's pig. You carry charms, little relics tied with twine, maybe a dried flower, a carved wooden cross, or a coin rubbed against a saint statue. You whisper prayers under your breath constantly. It's reflex now, like blinking or scratching. And those whispers, they're often half pagan, half Christian, old superstitions wrapped in new theology. Your grandmother still leaves bread out on All Hallows Eve. Your aunt says not to whistle at night or you'll invite death. You don't ask questions. You just follow the rules. The stakes feel too high not to. One quirky tidbit. Some folks believed sneezing expelled a little bit of your soul, so everyone would immediately say, "God bless you," not out of politeness, but to literally protect your spirit from floating away before a demon grabbed it. You wander past the village green and spot the local cunning woman, a healer, herbalist, and unofficial therapist. She's muttering over a pot of something that smells like garlic and hope. Some say she's a witch. Others say she's the only reason half the village isn't dead yet. Your mother once brought you to her with a fever. She rubbed goose fat on your chest, fed you something bitter, and prayed to Saint Hubert and the moon. You lived. So now, you're a little superstitious too. You look around at the world you live in and realize something important. Religion isn't just on Sunday, it's every moment. Every illness is divine punishment or spiritual test. Every bad crop might be your fault for skipping mass. Every good thing, a sign that God hasn't given up on you yet. You hear a baby cry, and someone mutters, God's will. A bird falls from a tree, a sign. Someone's cow gives birth to twins, a miracle. Someone else's cow dies, witchcraft. It's all connected, always. You pass the local graveyard on your way back. It's small, uneven, and a little too close to the church. Graves are shallow, markers are rare, and bones sometimes surface after heavy rain. You don't look too hard. Someone might recognize a relative. Death is everywhere. It's not feared so much as expected. The priest talks about the afterlife more than this life. Eternal reward or eternal punishment. Those are your options. You try not to dwell on it, but when every other person is sick or limping, it's hard to ignore. Back at your hut, you reach for the small wooden cross carved by your uncle. You touch it before every meal. You touch it when the wind howls. You touched it during that one lightning storm when the pig caught fire. That was a day. You start prepping dinner. More barley, more onion, maybe a bit of dried fish, if you're lucky. You hum a hymn as you stir, not because you're joyful, necessarily, but because it's habit. Something steady, something known. Outside, a group of boys plays at being knights, waving sticks and shouting oaths to imaginary saints. One falls, the others cry out, he's possessed, and pretend to exorcise him. You shake your head, kids, but secretly, you touch your charm again. Just in case, the cough starts again just after sundown. You hoped it was just hay in the throat, maybe a draft from the cracked window hide. But no, it's deeper now, rattling, wet. You sit up from your straw mattress and wince as your back pops. Your youngest sibling is curled next to you, hacking into the blankets, face slick with sweat. Illness in medieval times isn't a surprise. It's more like the weather, unavoidable, inconvenient, and occasionally catastrophic. You shuffle toward the corner where your family keeps its healing supplies, which is generous language for a basket of dried herbs, a dull knife, and some waxy cloth. You pick through it, trying to remember what's supposed to help. Willow bark? Maybe. Mint? Probably not. You grab a handful anyway. There's no real medicine here. Not unless you're in a major city with a university-trained physician, and even then, questionable. Most people rely on local herbalists, wise women, or trial and error. A lot of error. You chew a bit of the bark yourself. It tastes like sadness and dirt. The village healer arrives after a bit, called over by your aunt. She's in her 40s, which makes her an elder by local standards. She carries a cloth bag filled with roots and small glass jars that look suspiciously reused. She waves smoke over your sibling's head and mutters something that sounds half prayer, half scolding. She gives you instructions: warm compress, onion poultice, and boiled garlic water. You nod and pretend you understand. As she leaves, she squeezes your hand and says, "Sometimes it's just in God's hands now." Not comforting. You set water to boil and watch the flames flicker. They cast strange shadows on the wall, long, thin, twitching. You feel cold despite the heat. The sickness has entered the room like a second presence. You pretend you don't notice. Historians still argue whether medieval healing practices were effective folk science or dangerous superstition. The truth is, some remedies, like honey or willow bark, a natural source of salicin, did have medicinal value. Others, like bleeding, leeches, or powdered toad, were less helpful. You hear a loud sneeze from next door. and then another. Someone's lighting bundles of dried herbs to cleanse the air. It doesn't help, but it does make the entire village smell like bad tea. Quirky fact: people believed in the miasma theory, the idea that disease spread through bad air, hence the obsession with perfumes, incense, and hanging sweet-smelling herbs from doorways. If it smells foul, it's probably lethal. That's the logic. You finish the garlic water and make your sibling drink it. They gag. You wince. You both pretend it helped. The priest comes by the next day. He doesn't bring medicine. He brings last rites, just in case. You kneel, head down, listening as he anoints the sick child with oil and whispers blessings. He leaves just as quietly as he came. The fear settles in your chest now. It tightens, because you know how quickly things can turn. One day a cough, the next a shroud. You still go out to the fields. You still have to work. Illness doesn't excuse you from your duties. Your family needs food, and the Lord still expects his due. You carry the cough with you in your ears, like a background noise you can't shake. At midday, your neighbor collapses. He's sweating, eyes glassy. You help carry him back to his home, careful not to touch his face. Everyone avoids him now. Even his dog keeps its distance. That night, someone pounds on your door. Another villager has taken ill, fever, vomiting. The signs are the same. You don't say it out loud, but everyone's thinking it. Something is spreading. There's no concept of germs, no understanding of viruses or bacteria. The best explanation you've got is punishment from God, or from that one time you skipped mass and stole a turnip. You light extra candles and sleep sitting up. You wrap yourself in blankets and whisper prayers. You leave a crust of bread on the windowsill as an offering. For who? Doesn't matter. Someone, anyone. The days blur. Your sibling is no worse, but not better. They talk in their sleep, nonsense and whimpers. You don't know if that's a good sign. You remember your grandfather's words, when the coughing turns quiet. Start digging. You hate that you remember it. You try remedies, warm soup, clean rags, constant fire. You smear onion under their arms. You crush mint into a paste and apply it to their feet. You don't know why. You just heard someone say it worked. And here's the thing, sometimes it does. People recover, even when no one expects them to. And sometimes they don't. You don't know why one person lives and another doesn't. No one does. That's what makes it terrifying. One village over, someone swears it's the devil. Another blames a traveling merchant. Another says it's witches. Accusations begin to spread faster than the illness. You see one woman get dragged into the square and shouted at for hexing the livestock. You say nothing. You bring a bucket of clean water back to your sibling and find them sitting up. Barely, but they're upright. They blink at you. You feel a rush of something rare, hope. You sit beside them and offer soup. They sip. It stays down. You smile and tuck the blanket tighter around their shoulders. The fire crackles softly behind you. For the first time in days, the room feels less like a tomb. Still, you're cautious. Illness is a thief. It leaves, then returns with a vengeance. As you lie down that night, body sore from worry and work, you think of how fragile life is here. There are no guarantees, no medicines, no insurance, no certainty. Just instinct, tradition, and prayers, whispered to stars. But for now, the coughing has stopped, and that's enough. The morning comes with a strange silence. No rooster crows, no dogs bark. Even the wind seems hesitant. You wake slowly, eyes gritty, heart already halfway to panic. But your sibling sleeps quietly beside you, color back in their cheeks, breaths deep and steady. You exhale. Finally, outside, the village stirs, not bustling, exactly, just shifting from sleep to survival. You hear footsteps crunching in the frost-dusted grass and doors creaking open with the groans of wood far past its prime. Someone coughs, but only once. You count that as progress. Today, you're heading to the market. Well, market is a generous term. It's more like a clearing near the church, where people spread their goods on worn blankets or the backs of carts. Still, it's a lifeline, not just for goods, but for gossip, alliances, and the occasional miracle cure sold by someone wearing too many rings. You grab your bag, stitched from scraps and mended so many times it's practically more thread than fabric, and set out. The dirt path to the market is muddy from last night's rain, and you nearly lose a shoe more than once. Someone else does lose a shoe. They mutter something unholy and hop the rest of the way. Arriving at the market is like stepping into organized chaos. There are hens squawking in baskets, barrels of questionable ale, herbs strung up like garlands, and goats eyeing you with suspicion. You squeeze through the crowd, dodging elbows, hooves, and one child selling frogs for luck. You spot your friend Tom. He's waving from behind a table covered in cabbages, none of which look healthy. 3 for a penny, he calls out, then lowers his voice and says, or 1 for free if you take the ugly one. You grin and shake your head. Your task today is to trade some wool, a bit of smoked fish, and a cracked wooden spoon you're pretending is antique. You need salt, onions, and maybe a scrap of beeswax if you're feeling optimistic. The barter system is tricky. It's less about value and more about perceived value. Salt is practically currency. So is honey, and oddly, feathers, especially clean ones. Coins exist, sure, but most villagers see actual money about as often as they see the moon in daylight. Technically, you're supposed to use the local lord's coinage. Practically, you'll trade a pair of eggs for a knife and call it even. Quirky historical tidbit. In some medieval markets, there were officials known as altesters, or bread weighers, whose job was to make sure vendors didn't cheat. Imagine that your entire job is to test beer and sniff out stale loaves. Not glamorous, but probably one of the less awful gigs. You haggle with an old woman over a jar of salt. She insists your wool is too coarse. You insist her salt smells like pond water. Eventually, you both sigh and trade with the resignation of people who know this dance too well. She throws in a sprig of rosemary. You wink. Market diplomacy achieved. Historians still argue whether medieval markets were truly free marketplaces or subtly controlled by lords, guilds, and religious rules, likely both. You might trade freely unless the guild says otherwise, or unless it's Sunday, or unless someone tattles on you for unfair haggling. While scanning a table of dried roots and mysterious powders, you overhear a merchant whispering about a new sickness in the south. Not the plague, but something sticky. You pretend not to listen. You mentally update your apocalypse bingo card anyway. You trade your fish for a bit of beeswax and some charcoal, good for drawing or cleaning teeth, depending on how desperate you are. You pass a booth selling charms, iron crosses, tiny clay, figurines, ribbons said to protect against toothaches. You don't believe in that stuff, but you still buy a ribbon, just in case. Then comes the part of market day you secretly love. The performers, a juggler, likely more conman than artist, starts throwing apples while balancing on a barrel. Nearby, a puppet show kicks off with a loud slapstick thwack as one puppet bashes another for stealing bread. The kids laugh until they fall over. Adults pretend not to laugh to dot someone with a half-tuned lute starts singing a tale of a knight who fell in love with a fairy, lost his horse, and had to marry a goose. It doesn't rhyme. No one cares. It's entertainment, and you'll take it as you watch. You chew on a piece of dried apple bought from a cart run by a man missing most of his teeth. It's tough, sour, and suspiciously chewy. You keep chewing. Nutrition is secondary to novelty. You pass the time talking with neighbors. A woman complains about rats. A man insists his chickens are haunted. Another person claims they saw a monk levitate during prayer. You nod. Could be true. Stranger things have happened. Like that time it rained frogs. That did happen once. Or maybe it was toads. Historians debate. By late afternoon, the sun is low and the stalls begin to close. You pack your trades into your bag, which now smells like 5 different herbs and 1 very confused fish. As you leave, you spot someone selling miracle stones that glow faintly in the dark. You're tempted, but you remember your sibling and save the coin. You head home, bag over your shoulder, stomach growling. As you pass the fields, you see workers still bending low, hands in the dirt. One of them waves. You wave back. Your village may be small, your life may be hard, but there's a rhythm to it. A beat you've learned to march to, even if your shoes are full of mud and your apples taste like regret. Back home, your family is waiting. Your siblings sitting up, blanket around their shoulders, face flushed with health. You hand over the onion and the salt. The relief in their eyes is worth more than any coin. You light the fire and start dinner. Barley again, but with herbs this time. You hum the goose-marrying knight's song under your breath as you stir. And as the pot simmers and the sky darkens, you feel, if only for a moment, that maybe, just maybe, you've survived the day. You're jolted awake before sunrise by the sound of something hitting the door. Not a knock, more like a thud, followed by a grunt, and then the unmistakable squeak of a rusty hinge. You scramble up from the floor pallet, the cool air biting at your toes, and pull open the door. It's your uncle. He's bleeding, again. This time, it's his hand. A nasty slice across the palm. Probably from that rust-covered sickle he refuses to throw out. He shrugs it off as just a scrape, but you've seen too many scrapes turn into amputations to ignore it. You help him inside and start boiling water. There are no antiseptics here, no antibiotics. If infection sets in, it's down to luck and divine mercy. You wash the wound with clean water and wrap it with linen, hoping the herbs tucked inside the bandage do more than smell nice. He winces but doesn't complain. Pain's part of the scenery now. In medieval life, injury is inevitable. You're surrounded by sharp tools, hard labor, uneven ground, and zero safety precautions. OSHA is a far-off dream. Here, the rule is simple: don't die. You head to the barn shortly after, your uncle insisting he can still help mend the fence. You roll your eyes but let him come. A little blood loss never stopped a medieval man. Probably not healthy, but it's the culture. You pass a man hauling logs with one arm, the other gone, likely from a sore accident. He nods at you with a kind of quiet understanding, like, yep, still here. You wonder how many others walk around half-healed, stitched together by prayer, wine, and pure stubbornness. Here's a quirky fact. Many medieval folk believed in the healing power of saints. Relics, bones, cloth, or even teeth supposedly belonging to holy figures. Pilgrimages to shrines were as much about health as holiness. Touch the right relic, and maybe that festering wound stops festering. Your cousin once walked 5 days to press her lips against a glass vial said to hold Mary Magdalene's tears. She came back with the same cough, but fewer fleas. The fence repair is grueling. The wood is warped, your hands are blistered, and the nails are handmade and barely straight. You drive them in with a stone, because the hammer's been missing since spring. Probably in a field or under a cow. Your uncle's hand starts to swell, and you shoot him a look. It's fine, he mutters. It'll drain. He says it like it's a good thing. You disagree. Historians still argue whether medieval surgical practices were more advanced than previously believed, or whether they were basically medieval torture with a knife. On one hand, trepanning, drilling a hole in the skull, was a thing. On the other, some patients survived it. So, draw your own conclusions. Later, in the village square, you pass a man demonstrating bone setting. He yanks a boy's dislocated shoulder back into place with a swift, almost cheerful snap. The boy screams. The crowd claps. The man bows. You also spot a traveling barber surgeon setting up shop. His cart is covered in red and white cloth, the early symbol of the barber's trade. He offers haircuts, tooth pulling, bloodletting, and, if you've got the coin, lancing boils. It's like a spa day, but one you're statistically less likely to survive. You keep walking, as the day goes on. You help lift hay, mend broken tools, and try not to lose a finger. You pass by the mill, where the sound of grinding stone is deafening. A miller nods at you, covered in flour and stress. His assistant lost an eye last month to a misaligned gear. No one talks about it. By midday, your arm aches, your back throbs, and your thumb's bruised from where you dropped a beam. But you've kept all your parts attached. So far, a success. Lunch is a hunk of bread, half a turnip, and a bit of yesterday's onion. You chew slowly, pretending it's roast duck. It's not. It's never roast duck. Injury is constant. So are the workarounds. That man with the missing fingers. He's the best net weaver in town. The boy with the limp. Fastest shepherd on this side of the river. You adapt, or you don't survive. You think of your friend who got kicked by a horse last winter. He lost most of his teeth. Still smiles more than anyone you know. Gums and all. As evening falls, your uncle's hand looks better. Maybe the swelling's down, at least. You rewrap it more carefully this time. He offers you a crooked grin. See, told you. Just a scrape. You roll your eyes again. But maybe he's right. The stars come out, slow and cold. You settle by the fire, exhausted. Your body aching in places you didn't know existed. You rub your sore hands and think of how breakable you are. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still whole. Mostly, you drift off, thinking of a better world, one where accidents don't mean amputation, and infection doesn't mean goodbyes. A world with gloves, and soap, and maybe just one full night's sleep. But in this one, you take what you can get. You wake to the unmistakable sound of someone yelling about pigs. Not just a pig, the prized one. The one old widow Branwyn swears can predict rain and once saved her from a falling roof beam. Local legend, really. And now, it's on the loose, snorting with purpose, trailing half a cabbage cart behind it. You slip on your shoes, still damp from yesterday, and run out with the rest of the village. It's a chase. Kids shriek, dogs bark, adults curse under their breath in 5 different dialects. You narrowly avoid being bowled over by the pig, who clearly has places to be. That's how your day begins. And no, this isn't unusual. Today is not about work. Today is about community. Not in the modern coffee shop and book club sense, but in the survival through cooperation sense. You all live like lungs in the same chest. When one person suffers, the rest feel the squeeze. After the pig is finally wrangled, covered in cabbage, and deeply offended, you're pulled into a meeting at the village green. It's not formal. No scrolls, no podiums, just people standing around a tree, arguing about fence boundaries, stolen firewood, and whose goats keep eating whose laundry. One man insists his neighbor cursed his cows. The neighbor insists the cows are just dumb. A third person suggests letting the priest sort it out. No one likes that idea. The priest is still recovering from last week's mead incident. This sort of meeting happens often. It's how things get done, or at least get talked about, until someone loses patience and fixes it themselves. And then comes the real news. A messenger has arrived from the Lord's manor. He's not very tall, but he wears a hat with a feather and walks like his boots don't touch the dirt. He reads aloud. The harvest tax is going up. Again. Groans ripple through the crowd. A few people mutter curses. One elderly woman just stares at him like she's calculating whether her broom could take him in a fight. You're too tired to be surprised. Lords tax everything: land, crops, tools, marriages. In some places, there was even a cheese tax. No joke. You once heard of a village that had to pay a toll to use their own mill. And it wasn't cheap. So, when the messenger unfurls a second scroll, new tithes for the church, you brace yourself. 10% of your grain, 10% of your eggs, 10% of your patience. Historians still argue whether these taxes crushed the peasantry or simply maintained order in a chaotic system. Maybe both. Either way, your life just got harder. And the pig isn't sharing his cabbage. After the messenger leaves, you're pretty sure someone threw a turnip at him. The meeting breaks up. People grumble, but no one rebels, because rebellion, that's a fast ticket to hanging, or worse. Better to grumble now and survive later. You walk with your friend Lena back toward your homes. She's sharp-tongued, missing 2 fingers, and knows everything. She tells you the manor is getting new tapestries, while your neighbor can't afford shoes. You shake your head. She mutters, feathers and fools, and spits in the dirt. There's comfort in these walks, though. You talk about the weather, the harvest, the fact that the bees are acting weird again. Last time that happened, winter was brutal. Coincidence? Maybe. As you pass the church, you hear singing, the kind that rises slowly, rough voices, out of tune, but honest. A wedding is underway. You stop to watch from a distance. The couple is young, barefoot, beaming like they've never seen a tax. Notice, the whole village showed up, because, in a world like this, joy is everyone's business. Someone hands you a small cup of ale. It's warm, slightly sour, and perfect. The feast that follows is modest: boiled barley, roasted roots, a bit of dried meat, and 1 roasted goose that vanishes in under 3 minutes. There's music, dancing. Even the pigs seem happier. You laugh harder than you have in weeks. One of the best things about medieval life, community bonds are tight. If your roof collapses, 5 people will show up to fix it. If your child falls ill, everyone donates a scrap of food or coin. If your cow wanders off, the entire village will help find it and then talk about it for months. Remember that time you accidentally let the chickens into the priest's quarters? Yeah, still funny, still getting teased about it. Quirky fact, some medieval towns had official village scolds, people employed to call out bad behavior. Think of them as a cross between a hall monitor and your nosy aunt. No offense if you are a nosy aunt. By nightfall, the party has quieted. People drift home, some singing, some snoring, some still debating the best way to cook a turnip. You sit by your door, watching the stars blink into view. Someone's playing a lute in the distance. Probably that guy with 3 songs and no rhythm. Still, it's kind of nice. You think about the messenger, the taxes, the arguments, and the laughter. This is what life is, here. A little chaos, a lot of grit, and sometimes, despite everything, moments of real joy. You step inside, wrap up in your blanket, and listen to the faint music fade into the night. No rain, no fire, no plague, tonight, at least. You fall asleep, wondering how long this peace will last. It's not even dawn when the church bell rings, and not the gentle, come-to prayer kind of ring. No, this is a frantic, repeated clang that sends a chill straight down your spine. You sit up, heart already racing. That bell only rings like that for 2 reasons, fire or death. You rush outside, half-dressed, feet cold against the packed earth. Others are already gathering, lanterns flickering, eyes wide and tired. The air is still, too still, and then someone says it. Marjorie's boy. The cough took him. The air shifts. Grief and fear settle into the crowd like mist. You bite your lip, trying to swallow the lump in your throat. You'd hoped the cough was just a cold. Single quotes illness in the Middle Ages isn't a surprise, it's an expectation. You live side by side with it, sleep in the same room as it, drink from the same bucket. Sometimes you beat it, but often it beats you. You walk quietly with the others to Marjorie's home. A candle burns in the window, a sign of mourning. Her face is drawn, but dry. She's cried all she can. She nods at you and murmurs thanks as someone hands her a loaf of bread. It's what you do when words fail. Offer food, company, presents. No one talks much. No one needs to. The burial will be later today. The ground's soft enough now, and waiting won't make it easier. You offer to dig. So does half the village. She nods again. That's all. Later, as the sun rises, you find yourself with a shovel in hand, moving earth with heavy, steady strokes. The priest arrives, robes muddied at the hem, and mumbles prayers no one really listens to. It's not disrespect, it's just background noise to grief. One mainstream fact that always stuns people. Infant mortality rates in medieval Europe could reach 30 to 50%, depending on region and time period. Surviving childhood was like winning the lottery, and having multiple children was less a family plan than an insurance policy against tragedy. Marjorie's boy had made it to 6, long enough to know his favorite songs, long enough to miss. You sit with others after the burial, drinking thin soup from a shared pot. The topic shifts, slowly, as it always does. From the boy, to the crops, to that stray goat again. Life doesn't stop, it just stumbles forward. Someone mentions a new healer passing through a nearby town, claims she uses foxglove and dried frog skins. You raise an eyebrow. Another quips, "At least frogs are easier to catch than saints. And speaking of saints, here's your quirky tidbit. One medieval cure for epilepsy involved placing a piece of a martyr's shroud under your tongue. If that didn't work, well, at least your mouth smelled holy. As the day wears on, you visit Lena again. She's been coughing too. Not the same cough, she swears. But you know that look in her eyes, the fear she won't admit. You bring her warm broth and sit with her until she nods off, breathing softly. You glance around her home. Herbs hang from the ceiling, sage, thyme, lavender, some for flavor, most for health. The room smells sharp, almost medicinal. You hope it's enough. Historians still argue whether medieval folk had a solid understanding of contagion. There was no germ theory yet, of course, but they did isolate the sick, fumigate homes with aromatic smoke, and sometimes even quarantine entire towns. So maybe they weren't as clueless as we like to think. Still, there were also bloodlettings, leeches, and the dreaded poultice of pigeon droppings. Yes, really, applied warm. Best not to ask how. You return home late, carrying a bundle of firewood someone left on your doorstep. A quiet kindness. You leave half with Lena before going in. As you settle in, you think about what it means to live with constant risk, to wake up every day not knowing who will still be here tomorrow. It's exhausting, but strangely, it also makes every sunrise feel earned. You remember Marjorie once said that grief here comes in layers, like the onions you dig up from hard soil. At first, it stings. Then it feeds you. That night, you dream of warm rooms and safe beds, of places where children grow old, not just taller. You dream of a world where a cough doesn't take you from your mother's arms, where a fever doesn't steal your best friend. But when you wake, you do what you always do: stretch, breathe, stand up, and keep going. Because here, life doesn't pause for pain, it just continues. You wake up to the smell of something awful. Not just, oh, someone left out the fish awful. This is what died, fermented, and then held a family reunion. Awful. You sit up, nose already wrinkling, and realize, it's market day. Every few weeks, merchants and farmers gather in the village center to sell their goods, which sounds lovely in theory. In reality, it's a sensory onslaught of the highest order. Imagine hot sun baking raw meat, pigs squealing in mud, fish laid out on old wood, and people who haven't bathed in a while. You step outside and are instantly greeted by the full perfume of medieval commerce. Someone nearby is frying onions. Great. Someone else is haggling over a sheep. Fine. But mostly, it's dung. Everywhere. See, the village doesn't have paved roads. There are no drains, no street cleaners, and certainly no zoning laws. Pigs roam freely, chickens dart under carts, and people just toss things into the road. Bones, wastewater, bits of spoiled food. At one point, someone even tried tossing their chamber pot out a second-story window. It didn't end well. The victim survived, but the memory lingers, especially if the wind's just right. You weave through the crowd, careful to avoid puddles that definitely aren't just water. A child runs by you barefoot. You can only respect the bravery. Today, you're helping Lena sell her herbs. She's still coughing a bit, but better, and insists on being out with everyone else. You both set up a small table, thyme, rosemary, mint, and something labeled thistle for tooth pain in shaky chalk letters. Her stand is right next to a man selling blessed eels. Yes, eels. He claims they were caught near a shrine and now cure headaches, warts, and spiritual fatigue. He has a very loud bell. He rings every 2 minutes. You're rethinking everything. People buy everything from salted fish to wool yarn to beeswax candles. There's even a traveling tinker mending pots and a woman selling ribbons that somehow smell like goats. Still, everyone seems content. Quirky tidbit time. Did you know some medieval towns paid people called rakers to collect manure from the streets? It wasn't just for cleanliness. It was valuable fertilizer. Problem was, rakers often disappeared when the smell got too strong. Can't imagine why. You watch as 2 women argue over a chicken. One claims it's hers because it knows her. The chicken seems uninterested in either woman's authority and walks away entirely. Later, you trade a bundle of herbs for a lump of cheese. It's slightly moldy, but that's basically flavor, right? You eat around the green bits and call it gourmet. Historians still argue whether medieval marketplaces were centers of thriving economic development or just controlled chaos disguised as commerce. Probably both. They were where news spread, deals happened, alliances formed, and yes, gossip bloomed like moldy cheese. You hear whispers about a knight passing through last week who paid in gold. Also, someone swears the miller is secretly hiding extra flour and not declaring it to the reeve. If true, that's enough to get him fined or flogged. Either way, you file it away in your mental drama folder. You spend hours on your feet, calling out prices, fetching water, and dodging over-enthusiastic pigs. One actually bites your tunic. Rude. By midday, the sun is high and everyone's crankier. You hear a juggler is performing near the ale tent, so you and Lena sneak off to watch. He's decent. 3 balls, a wooden spoon, and something suspiciously like a preserved turnip. You applaud politely. A fight breaks out nearby. Something about a goat that looks too similar to another man's goat. They're shouting. Someone brings up an unpaid dowry. The reeve steps in and yells louder. It ends with both men getting dunked in a water trough to cool off. Classic. You make your way back to your stand, now surrounded by flies. The blessed eel guy is loudly offering a 2-for-1 special. Lena mutters something unkind about eel-based economies. You help her pack up what didn't sell and head home just as the sun dips. Your feet hurt, your back aches, and there's definitely something sticky on your sleeve you don't want to investigate. But it's not all bad. You pass by the ale tent again and hear singing, old songs, clumsy harmonies, and drunken giggles. You see the blacksmith dancing with someone who may or may not be his cousin. A child chases a dog who's carrying a stolen sausage in triumph. You remember this mess, this stink, this clamor. This is community. It's loud, unruly, occasionally eel-based, but it's also yours. Back at home, you scrape the muck off your shoes and settle in by the fire. You split the cheese with Lena, both of you too tired to talk much. The quiet is nice. Outside, the streets are mostly empty now, except for a very determined chicken still walking in circles. You leave it be. You crawl into bed, blanket rough, but warm, belly full. You fall asleep to the distant sound of someone trying to sing Greensleeves and failing spectacularly. Your last thought before sleep. Tomorrow, you're skipping market day. The morning sun filters in through the wooden shutters, and for once, you're not rushing to the fields or scrubbing something caked in mud. No, today is different. Today is festival day. Your bones still ache from yesterday's market chaos, but there's something in the air. Laughter, bread baking, possibly someone already drunk and singing early. Whatever it is, it feels lighter than usual. You pull on your best tunic, which is to say, your least patched tunic. It still itches, of course, and you're 80% sure there's a flea colony planning real estate expansion in the sleeve. But hey, fashion is pain. Outside, the village has transformed. Bunting, made of dyed scraps, flutters overhead, tied between poles and trees. Children dart past, with faces smudged in soot and smiles stretched wide. The baker is giving out sweet buns, and for once, you're allowed a whole one. You bite into it, savoring the honey glaze, and immediately burn your tongue. Worth it. This isn't a saint's day or a religious feast. It's something rarer, a seasonal fare, a chance for everyone, from peasants to petty nobles, to let loose. And for you, it's a rare day of near freedom. You join a group gathered near the village green, where a jester in a redandilo patchwork outfit balances a stick on his nose. A few toddlers gasp. A drunk guy tries it and nearly knocks over a pig. Excellent entertainment. Someone starts up a lute, and before long, a circle forms for dancing. You're dragged in by Lena, whose energy today defies all reason. And soon you're spinning awkwardly, trying not to stomp on toes. You mostly fail, but no one minds. This isn't courtly dance. This is sweaty, barefoot, joyful, stumbling. Here's your mainstream historical fact for this section. Medieval festivals often aligned with agricultural calendars. Planting, harvest, and they weren't always church affairs. Some were throwbacks to older, pre-Christian traditions, with bonfires, dancing, and slightly suspicious rituals involving mead and maypoles. As the day goes on, the games begin. You watch a pig race, which is less about racing and more about people chasing chaos on four hooves. A boy wins by accidentally scaring his pig into running straight into a fence. He's declared the victor and given a turnip. You clap. There's also a cabbage toss, a tug-of-war over a puddle, muddy and glorious, and a riddle contest by the ale tent. You try to answer one riddle, fail miserably, and are gently booed by a man with a flower crown and no shoes. Speaking of shoes, someone walks past selling festival sandals made from woven reeds. You buy a pair for 2 buttons and half a carrot. They disintegrate an hour later, but you admire the entrepreneurial spirit. Nearby, a makeshift puppet theater is attracting a crowd. The story involves a greedy miller, a clever goose, and an exploding outhouse. The children laugh so hard one falls over. You laugh too, despite yourself. Let's pause for a quirky tidbit. In some regions, fool societies, yes, that's what they were called, organized, licensed mischief during festivals. They crowned mock kings, parodied authority, and sometimes even fined the local priest in jest. Unless he was unpopular, then not so jest. But not everything is light-hearted. A man is caught stealing a meat pie. Normally, this would lead to a fine, maybe time in the stocks. But today, the reeve simply gives him a sharp word and takes the pie back. Festivals are mercy days, in their own odd way. Still, the stocks are set up nearby, just in case someone overdoes it. You walk past and see they're already occupied. A red-faced man snores loudly, head lolling. Someone's drawn a mustache on his face with charcoal. Classic festival behavior. By late afternoon, a traveling minstrel troupe arrives. Big news. They sing bawdy songs, one of which is quickly hushed when the priest walks by. He coughs disapprovingly, but doesn't stop them. Even he knows better than to ruin a good chorus. You buy a meat skewer from a woman with 7 teeth and the best sauce you've ever tasted. You ask for the recipe. She just winks and mutters, love, lard, and secrets. Fair historians still argue whether these festivals acted as pressure valves or genuine community celebrations. Did they let the peasants blow off steam to avoid rebellion? Or were they deeply ingrained cultural events that reminded everyone they were more than just workers? Maybe both, maybe neither. But today, it feels like celebration. The sun starts to set, painting everything golden orange. A bonfire is lit, and you're handed a cup of cider, warm, spiced, slightly fermented. You sip it, letting the heat spread through your limbs. Lena is dancing again, arms raised, hair wild. You join her, and for a moment, you forget the fleas, the fields, the back-breaking work. You forget about the cough that still rattles in her lungs. When she's tired, you're just here, alive, laughing. A woman begins telling stories by the fire. Tales of knights who turned into birds, of clever maidens outwitting trolls, of old magic that still lingers in the woods. You lean in, listening. The younger kids are wide-eyed, clutching scraps of sweet bun and each other's hands. By nightfall, people start drifting home, slower now, the air thick with smoke and sweat and memories. You help Lena carry her empty basket back. She hums, a tune you don't recognize. Probably made it up just now. As you lie in bed later, you smile into the dark. Today, the world didn't hurt. Today, it danced, and you kept up. The next day is anything but festive. Your body protests every movement as you crawl out of bed. Dancing and cider are great in the moment, but wow, your knees didn't sign that contract. You limp toward the hearth, muscles stiff, joints squeaky, like someone stuffed hay where your bones used to be. But rest, not a chance. There's word of a storm coming, and that means emergency prep mode. You join others from the village on the edge of the forest, hauling bundles of kindling, chopping last-minute logs, and tying down anything that might blow away, including one deeply confused goat. The sky's already shifting, bloated grey clouds, rolling over like an army of grumpy sheep. The wind picks up, sending leaves skittering like they're trying to warn you. You pull your cloak tighter. It smells like wet wool and regret. Back in the village, shutters slam, animals are herded into cramped barns. You help a mother gather her chickens, one of which seems convinced it lives on her roof. You end up climbing said roof. The chicken wins. Obviously mainstream historical fact. Storms in medieval times were not just a nuisance. They were catastrophic. No reinforced roofs, no early warning systems, and definitely no flood insurance. A single storm could ruin crops, flood homes, and spread disease faster than you can say no, not again. You get roped into digging a drainage trench behind Lena's house. The mud is clingy and cold, and you slip at least twice. Lena, watching from under a thatch awning, offers helpful advice, like, try not to fall. By the time you're done, you look like a rejected scarecrow. You consider staying outside and becoming one. The first raindrops fall like heavy coins. A few kids giggle and try to catch them on their tongues. Then thunder rumbles, and everyone scatters like mice. You hunker inside with Lena, doors bolted, fire stoked, every pot you own moved strategically to catch drips from the ceiling. Because yes, it leaks. Everything leaks. The wind howls like a banshee auditioning for a haunted house. Roofs groan. You hear a crash from a neighbor's place, and pray it wasn't their chimney again. Spoiler, it was. Let's pause for a quirky tidbit. Some people believed storms were caused by angry saints, or worse, witches. In one village, it was common to ring church bells during storms to scare away the thunder. Problem was, standing next to a metal bell tower in a lightning storm ... wasn't the safest life choice. Historians still argue whether these rituals were acts of faith or just desperate attempts to control a terrifying, unknowable sky. You sit by the fire, watching. Shadows dance across the walls. Outside, the wind screams and the rain pelts like it's trying to dig through stone. But inside, there's warmth. You and Lena pass the time shelling peas, sharing stories, and avoiding eye contact with a very determined spider in the ceiling corner. At one point, Lena tells you about a storm from when she was a child, how the river overflowed, the grain stores flooded, and her family had to sleep in the church for a week. You ask what they ate. She shrugs and says, mostly hope. The storm rages through the night. Sleep is not happening. Every creak sounds like doom. Every gust feels like it's trying to peel the roof off and whisk you away like some medieval Dorothy. But somehow, the house holds. Morning comes, grey and dripping, but intact. You step outside, boots squelching, and take stock. The chicken coop has relocated 3 feet to the left. Someone's laundry now decorates the treetops. The outhouse door is gone, just gone, probably halfway to Normandy by now. Everyone emerges, bleary-eyed, like hungover ants after a keg party. You join the cleanup without complaint, just breathing in the wet earth, broken branches, and sweet, rare scent of survival. Then comes the worst part. Checking the fields, you slosh through knee-deep muck to where the barley used to stand tall. It's not good. Flattened stalks, muddy roots, and puddles where you're pretty sure crops once lived. You and the others just stand there, quiet. It's a loss. Maybe not total, but heavy enough to weigh on every shoulder. That's the thing in this world. Nature holds the upper hand. You can toil, prepare, pray, and still get slapped with wind and rain that undo everything overnight. It's humbling, it's unfair, but it's also the way things are. You help restake a fence, tie up the leaning scarecrow who frankly looks how you feel, and check on the animals. Most are fine, though one cow seems personally offended by the weather. You get it. By afternoon, the sun finally pushes through, casting a kind light over the soaked village. You take a moment, just a quiet breath on the hill, to watch steam rise from the fields. There's destruction, yes, but also resilience. Shoots will resprout, homes will be patched. Life trudges on, mud-caked and stubborn. Later, Lena boils some root vegetables, and you both eat in silence. Not the strained kind, just the kind where words aren't necessary. You survived another day, and in this time, that's a victory. You wake before dawn, not because you want to, but because that's what people do here. No alarms, no snooze buttons, just the rooster from 3 doors down screaming like it has a personal vendetta. You groan and sit up, every part of you stiff and slightly damp from the ever-present medieval dew that seems to sneak indoors no matter how many furs you pile on. Today is nothing special, no feast, no storm, no wild drama, just another ordinary day. And weirdly, that might be the hardest kind, because life in medieval times, it's not all plagues and sword fights and dramatic castles silhouetted against lightning. Most of it is just chores, repetitive, grueling, necessary. You head out, boots squelching slightly from yesterday's rain, and help feed the animals. The pig greets you like a long-lost friend by snorting and trying to eat your sleeve. You dodge, barely, then toss in some scraps. The cow needs milking, and she is not in the mood. The stool tips once, and you catch the bucket just in time. A small win. You count those by mid-morning. You're helping Lena repair a section of thatch on the roof. You climb up shakily, praying the straw holds. And yes, it's straw, woven carefully and layered thick. It insulates well if you keep it dry and mold-free, which you don't. Ever, but mainstream historical fact here. Thatch was the most common roofing material in medieval villages, especially for the poor. It was cheap, local, and surprisingly durable when maintained. But it also became home to bugs, birds, and the occasional black rat looking for free rent. Historians still argue whether its prevalence was a clever adaptation or a desperate necessity. Probably both. By noon, you're starving. Lunch, today, barley stew with exactly 3 lentils in it. Lena apologizes. You tell her it's fine, but your stomach disagrees audibly. She laughs. You both chew slowly, savoring the hint of salt like it's rare treasure. And then, back to work. The fields need attention. After the storm, the irrigation ditches have shifted. You spend hours with a shovel, redirecting the water flow like a very muddy architect. You meet 2 toads. One is indifferent. The other tries to sit on your foot for 20 minutes. Here's a quirky tidbit. In parts of medieval Europe, it was believed that frogs and toads could predict the weather or even control it. Some farmers placed them in jars during storms to trap the rain. No one really agreed if it worked, but it gave people something to blame besides the sky. The day drags on, your hands blister, your shoulders burn. You wonder how anyone ever got old in this world, and then you see old Thomas hobbling with his stick, still feeding chickens at age 70. 70, in a time when the average life expectancy hovered around 35 if you were lucky. Okay, technically that stat includes infant mortality, which was sky high. If you made it to adulthood, you had a better shot. But still, every grey hair you see is a badge of stubborn survival. The sun begins to dip, casting long shadows over the rows of struggling crops. You pause, leaning on your shovel, and listen. Nothing but wind and distant laughter, and maybe your stomach again. Back home, you wipe mud off your boots, a futile gesture, and Lena hands you a small piece of cheese. Actual cheese. You look at her like she's presented a diamond. She rolls her eyes. Don't get used to it. But you do. For 10 glorious seconds, you get very used to it. Dinner is quiet. Lena hums. You stretch out by the fire, arms heavy, back sore, eyes drooping. There's no drama, no jester, just a flickering hearth, and the knowledge that you did what needed doing. And that's life, really. Not heroic, not epic, just survival stitched together with small kindnesses, borrowed tools, and the occasional piece of cheese. You lie down, pulling your thin blanket over your chest. Outside, the night settles in soft and slow. An owl hoots. Somewhere, someone's still laughing from a story told too late over a shared bottle. You let the sound wash over you like warm rain. And as sleep pulls at your thoughts, you realize maybe you could last a day in medieval times, but tomorrow, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Even though your body is tucked beneath soft covers in your modern-day bed, your mind has spent the night wading through muddy medieval fields, ducking under stormy skies, and sampling the blandest stew imaginable. Why? Why walk through centuries of discomfort, struggle, and strange goat behavior. Because history, yes, even the boring, itchy, dirt under the nails kind, is a mirror. When you learn about the past, you're not just memorizing dates or names, you're peeking into the lives of people who laughed, cried, argued over wells, and fought moldy roofs, just like you would. They loved, they feared, they hoped, and while their world looked very different, they still woke up each day and tried to make it through. Sound familiar? Studying history teaches empathy. It humbles you. It reminds you that progress didn't appear overnight. It was built brick by brick, sometimes by people who didn't even know they were changing anything. Like Lena patching a roof, or Tumas feeding chickens at 70, ordinary actions that, over time, made extraordinary futures. Historians still debate whether we truly learn from the past, or if we're just doomed to repeat it. But either way, knowing the road behind us gives us a better map going forward. It grounds us, it softens arrogance, and it connects us to every muddy, starry, cheese-deprived human who came before Dot. So now, after everything you've trudged through tonight, it's time to rest. Imagine a quiet path stretching ahead of you, lined with tall, whispering trees. A soft breeze carries the scent of warm bread and wood smoke. You walk slowly, barefoot. The ground is cool but gentle, no rush, each step lighter than the one before. Overhead, stars begin to bloom, soft silver on navy blue. They flicker like embers in the sky. You come to a small cottage. Light spills from the windows. Inside, a hearth glows and a gentle voice hums a tune you almost recognize. You don't need to knock. The door is already open. This place, this quiet moment, it's just for you. You lie down near the fire. The warmth wraps around you like a blanket woven from centuries. Every sound fades. Every thought softens. There's nothing to do. Nowhere to be. You've walked far tonight. Now rest, time traveler. Tomorrow can wait. Good night.